Clubhouse.
Welcome to the first episode of Pod Clubhouse's coverage of independent authors, spotlighting talent local to me and wherever else on the internet I can find them. This is your host, Paul Daly, and I'm joined today by author Amy Campbell. How are you doing today?
Hi there, I'm great. How are you doing today?
So far, so good today. Really no complaints. I mean, you're also in Texas, so you know it's a warm one today, but that's just sort of how it is this part of the year.
Yes, today we're just staying in the air conditioning out of the heat, pretty much like we do until November.
Yeah, it's safe time to come out in November. All right, so let's get to know Amy a little bit. What's your day job, Amy?
Well, so I am a former librarian with Harris County Public Library. However, I sadly had to leave that job back in 2023 to be home more for my children. My eldest has autism and ADHD, so he was having lots of struggles at school, and we just thought it would be better if I were more accessible. So I'm like half stay-at-home mom now, and then half author. So I pretty much write full time. But between being a mom and being an author, I work, like 14, 16-hour days just because that is the necessity of those things. That both jobs have to get done.
Completely understand. I am one of the few people you might ever talk to that has a complete understanding of what you're talking about. I have 3 adult children, all with special needs, ranging from deaf blindness to autism and other issues, and we decided to homeschool for the maybe similar reasons to you. There's this point in school where kids that need special education, it gets to be like really freaking hard to deal with the system.
Yes, it really does.
Unless you're devoting a lot of time to it. In our case, we had 3 kids, and so it was like, holy crap, that's a lot.
That is, yes.
Hard meetings all the time, it felt like.
We've actually kept him in general education because he has trouble making friends. And I thought, if we did homeschool, he wouldn't be around any other humans besides me, which is not healthy. So he actually still goes to public school, but I still have to do all those arts you're talking about. We do play therapy quite often. There's all the appointments that go with those special needs.
I do know. We did local like ABA therapists and speech therapists, and they have a rec therapist. Because like I said, I have 3 kids. So they have all different kinds of stuff, even as adults.
Yes.
All right. So he started in being a librarian. Is that where you got interested in starting to write for yourself, or did it come earlier than that?
So it actually came much earlier than that. I'm the type of kid who, back in the 80s, we would go to the public library and my parents would get anxiety by the number of books I wanted to take home and read. So that was always very, very worrying to them because I'd have, like a stack of 50 books and they're afraid we're going to lose one. But we never did lose one. So that's, star for me there. But when I still remember back when I was 7, I had the idea that, one day I want to be an author. But then what happened, as happens to us, I became an adult and all of the adulting priorities took place. And back when I was becoming an adult at that time, indie publishing was not a thing. So if you wanted to publish, you had to go to the traditional route. And it was just a lot when I was, a new adult and trying to get a job and live life and survive. So all the writing went to the wayside for many, many years. It's kind of funny because I didn't start writing again until 2020 when COVID hit. I very vividly remember April of 2020 sitting at my computer one night playing World of Warcraft because I'm also a World of Warcraft gamer. And I was thinking, I loved World of Warcraft and the story world. And I was like, but I want to have my story world again. So I sat down and started writing. And what's also very funny is I married my husband in 2008. He really didn't know that I had this path of wanting to be an author. So when I started sitting down and doing nothing but writing, he was like, what are you doing? And I said, I need to write a book and get it published because if I get COVID and die, I need to have made sure I achieved this dream of mine. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, this is what I wanted to do since I was 7. So he was like, okay. So pretty much since 2020, I have not stopped writing.
That's really interesting. The creative impulse, adulthood tries to kill it like it's like they're mortal enemies. Adulthood and creativity seem to be like at odds, you know? And
Yes.
so it's great to hear that you chucked that idea out the window. Do any of those ideas from your childhood make it into your stories now?
Well, so what's kind of funny is my first series, which is my Tales of the Outlaw Mages series, which that's a Western fantasy kind of with Firefly vibes. The main character in it actually existed back when I was writing stories back in like high school and college. And so I really loved the characters in those stories, so I wanted to kind of bring them forward. But what's also funny is, because that's been 20 years since I last wrote the character. So just like I changed in that time, he changed in that time too, where he went from this very medieval type fantasy world to this Western fantasy world in the Old West because I thought, there's not enough fantasies that take place in an Old West setting, and that's really cool. So he went there, but when I originally wrote him, he had this telepathic horse named Emrys. So Emrys came along with him as a telepathic Pegasus. So those two stayed, but then all the cast of characters around them are new. So that was kind of interesting.
Kind of adapting your idea to where you were now, sounds like.
Right, exactly. So the funny thing is, that character's been with me so long that he's more than old enough to vote and drink alcohol in the state of Texas.
Then he's getting he's a very refined character, at least mentally. Then you, that's I guess probably the challenge of finding a character's voice for it is for me whenever I attempt to write is getting far enough into the character's head that I can speak for them and can be right. That's what they would say, not what I would say.
Yes, yeah. So he's one that has kind of lived rent free in my head for all those many years, but he kind of went dormant, didn't do too much until I sat down again in 2020. And but I knew him, I knew kind of what he was like, so we were ready to go.
This is Blaise.
Yeah, that's Blaise, yes.
I've started to read the first one, Breaker, and
Oh,
so
awesome.
I'm roughly familiar with the setting and that this is like you say a Western world, but with various kinds of magic that exists in it. Is it like a high level type magic or like a fantasy like say like Lord of the Rings or something, or is it lower level, more like very few people have it. It's not that powerful when they use it.
So in that world, it's dangerous to have magic because people who have magic can then be bound to someone else and become a therapist. They're pretty much used as a tool for their magic. Because at least in this part of the world, the mages are kind of one-trick ponies. So they have kind of a specialty that they're very good at. And so Blaise's magic, which most people are going to be like, what is a breaker? His magic actually came about because I was thinking more about my eldest son, the one with autism and ADHD, and thinking about how people who have conditions like this, or just me in general, because I'm clumsy, like you go through life thinking that all you do is break things and make things bad. So I wanted to show someone with a destructive magic who he's very much what's called a sentimental character that my readers want to just like wrap him in a blanket and have nothing bad happen to him because he's just a genuinely nice guy. So I wanted to have this kind of very dangerous magic that people would see as a weapon, but give it to somebody who is the total opposite of that, but who kind of has challenges in his life because of that magic that he has to overcome.
I really appreciate that kind of messaging, and I hope people get it without needing to dig too deep because it sounds like it's inspirational for your audience.
That's the one that a lot of people connect with because, in addition to that, he's actually an asexual character, which means he doesn't have sexual attraction to others, but he does still end up in a romance in the series. So it's got, different LGBTQ rep, and I've had readers email me thanking me for having that rip. And it's just, I don't bring it to the forefront. I'm not like, this is a fantasy and this is what it's about. And there are these characters that it's about, being asexual or LGBTQ. That's just part of their life as they go on these magical adventures where I make bad things happen to them.
What drew you to the Western? Have you always been a fan of, the Western aesthetic?
Yeah, being a Texas girl, I'm also a horse lover, so I've been collecting like model horses since I was young. I actually have a version of Emrys that's a model horse here with me. So yeah, I've always loved horses and the West, and I would go to the rodeo when I was a kid, well, and as an adult too. And my parents actually have a farm in Brenham, so in the Texas Hill Country, that we would go to all the time. So I actually used for some of the areas in Breaker and the Outlaw Mages, the area Blaise is from originally is a lot like the Texas Hill Country. And there's a part where he's fleeing from the Confederation. And in my head, that's these woods on my parents' farm that he's running through.
That's pretty neat. For people that don't know, Brenham is kind of halfway between Houston and Austin.
Right.
Um, and it is where the best ice cream in the world is made.
Yes, we drive by that location every time we go up there, so we always get to see Bluebell.
Nice. Other states don't know what they're missing.
Exactly.
It's all ours. Okay, so then the Western aesthetic and the Western idea. I mean, do you have a favorite, either like Western author or maybe even movie or two that you go back to time and again?
Well, it's really funny because I haven't really read that many actual Westerns because they're not quite the genre I want, which it's kind of funny that I say that because a lot of times when people see Breaker sitting at a convention or just in general, they see the Western motifs and they're like, oh, it's a Western. I don't like Westerns. I don't want to read a Western. But I have to say, no, there's a lot of magic in it. It's more like a fantasy than a Western. It's got Firefly vibes. When I tell people Firefly vibes, they're like, "Oh, let me look at that now." Um, so what's also really funny is I didn't realize the Firefly vibes until after Breaker was already published, and a friend who read it, she's like, "Did you watch Firefly before you wrote this?" And I was like, "No," and she's like, "It just really has that feel." And I was like, "Okay." So then I watched Firefly again at that point, and I was like, "Oh yes, like that's actually a good comp, even though Firefly is a lot more sci-fi than
Right.
fantasy or
Technology
real
based.
Western, but it's got that feel to it."
Right. You're not looking to create historical fiction with magic. You wanted to capture the kind of the romantic ideal that feels right.
Right, exactly. And I'm very much like a vibe writer, and I had this mental image of a majestic Pegasus flying through like a actual Grand Canyon type of scene. So I just had all like, I would get lots of mental ideas of what I want for the story in the series.
So when I think of Weird West, the first thing that springs to my mind is the Dark Tower series. Have you read any of those?
I haven't because this is going to be sacrilege to some people, but I'm just not really a Stephen King fan. So I haven't read them. When I worked at the library, I would flip through them because, I would see lots of books. So I'd flip through a lot of things. And I was like, this just doesn't call to me. So I'm one of those readers to where if a book doesn't call to me or kind of grab me, then I'm like, I have too much else going on because I'm a mom and everything. So not gonna waste my time on that. Well, not waste my time, but I don't have the time to give to that. So,
Sure.
um, so that's one of the things I have to do. Although I do listen to a lot of audiobooks now and have for a couple of years just because that's easy to do while, washing the dishes, folding laundry, driving somewhere. So
Hmm.
that's how a lot of my reading actually gets done now. So I probably could look at the library system and see if I could get it from one of the local ones on audio through Libby or something like that.
Well, you might be on the right track, not wanting to cross the streams, with that story and your story. If you're going to continue with the mages, I mean, aside from the idea of magic in a Western, his story is, of course, very dark. It's in the title. Uh, and it
And,
is,
and that's one of the things I've noticed with a lot when I was looking to find comps for my books. A lot of the Weird West and Western fantasies are very kind of grimdark, and I write
Mm.
a lot more hopeful type fiction.
Mm-hmm. The messaging with yours, from what you described in terms of being able to be what many call cursed with destructive magic and then being able to turn it around into something that works for you is
Hmm.
uplifting. And I don't want to spoil the end of the Dark Tower, but it doesn't it doesn't quite raise you up. Uh,
Right.
and when you say you don't like or you don't jive with Stephen King, these are the most Stephen Kingiest of the Stephen
Hmm.
King books. So Stephen Kingy that he's actually in them
Oh,
himself.
that's funny.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Anyhow, not to dwell on that, I just wanted to see if you had run into those at all. All right, so then we understand where the interest in the West came from. Let's talk about the interest in fantasy and the Pegasus and chupacabras and anything else that appears in the books.
Well, the chupacabras just came from, general Texas and Mexican type cryptids because I thought, you don't see chupacabras in fantasy books. I mean, just throw that in there as a reference because that'd be fun and people will be like, wait, what? This fantasy has chupacabras? So just for people who are listening, they're not like a main creature. So if you love chupacabras, you won't see a ton of them, but they do get mentioned because I thought let's just put some one-off mentions and like jackalopes get mentioned at one point in one of the
Mm.
books. So I just thought it would be fun to put those little cryptid Easter eggs in. But as far as, fantasy and the Pegasi, so, like I said, I was a voracious reader growing up. And one of the first actual fantasy authors I ever read was Mercedes Lackey and her Heralds of Valdemar series. Are you familiar with that series?
I'm not, but I saw her at Comic Palooza many years ago, and when they had more authors than they have had recently.
Just like a really brief overview for that series. So it's actually a really huge series spanning like centuries in this world of hers that pretty much the magic users in that world end up getting paired with these white telepathic horses that are the companions.
Okay.
So I always loved, the horse girl in me was like, oh yeah, here's telepathic horses to read about with their magical riders. So that was totally up my alley when I was a kid and teenager. So I was really into that. And so the Outlaw Mages with the mages and their telepathic Pegasi companions are a little bit of an homage to that. But of course, I put my own twist on it.
It's important that you use the correct plural Pegasi so people know in the
Yes.
in the future how to say it. That's one of the things with fantasy books is often we see words that don't exist, even though this one does, and then we have to kind of sound it out in our brains, or maybe they're just new to us, and so we come up with a way of saying it that doesn't exist.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's like, and I tried very hard with this series for most of the names. Some of the Pegasi have more difficult to pronounce names, but like all the humans are, for the most part, normal human names. Because one of my pet peeves is when I'll read a fantasy book and they have this name that's just, it looks like they just slammed their face on the keyboard and that's the character's name now. So in my head, it's like, and blah, blah, blah went on this epic quest. So I wanted to have names that people could pronounce and would not stumble over as they read. So that was one of my big goals for the naming because that was always a pet peeve of mine.
They make it harder than they need to sometimes. Like I've listened to the main run of the Game of Thrones books, and the narrator in the first few books calls Baelish. He calls him Petire Baelish, and then in the last few books he calls him Peter Baelish, which is what I guess most people call him is Peter Baelish. And he also messed up Brienne's name, called it Brienne or something like that. It was like, and these are long books.
Yes,
So the
yes,
author had to say those names hundreds of times per book because that's
yes.
I don't know if you've ever read them, but Martin has a pretty definite, specific way of like introing a scene, and it's describes what everyone's doing, what they're wearing, what they're eating, what they smell like, and then he starts
Hmm. Hmm.
with the action. So they it's funny. It's just funny that they made it harder than necessary with those odd spellings, and then the narrator didn't remember what he had said hundreds of
Yeah,
times
yeah.
before.
I will say though, I kind of violate my rule about that with book two in that series is called Ephegist.
Okay.
And so what's really funny is that My mom, very supportive of what I do. So she was curious when I was writing book two. She saw the name, and so she went and Googled it. And then she came back to me and she said, "The only thing that comes up when I Google that is your book." And I said, "That's because I made up that word. It's the name of one of the characters' magic because it's based on effigies. So he's an effigist." She was like, "Oh, okay," which my mom doesn't read a lot of, well, she doesn't read any fantasy, so that whole concept was a little bit beyond her. But she was like, "Okay, that's different." So that's where one of the places that I did kind of violate my preference there. But the Outlaw Mage series are usually named after one of the characters' magic for the titles, so that's why book two is what it was.
I see. So that makes sense. It's almost like without having read that far ahead. So then it sounds like it's like introducing new characters along the way.
The way I worked it, so Blaise is pretty much he's like the anchor main character throughout. So he has, the main plot and main role in all six books so far. But I'm one of those people who collect characters the way I collect model horses. And like in World of Warcraft, I have so many alts, it's crazy. So as I'm writing, I just naturally accrue these other characters. And I'm like, oh well, let's find out more about them because that'll enrich the world a little bit. So, like in book two, we see a little bit more of Jack, who is a problem for Blaise in book one, but we see more of him in book two. And then in book three, Dreamer, we see a little bit more about the character who I won't say his name because it would be a spoiler right now, but we see more about that character.
I see. Let's see. So you have how many books in this series currently? 9?
So that
6?
series right now has six and then a novella.
And they're all available on your store at amycampbellbooks.com or amycampbell.info. Is that right?
Yes, yes, they should all be there. They're available in their special edition hardcovers, paperbacks, and then I also have the ebooks there. And people who buy ebooks from my store, they do get the special edition ebook, so it'll have all the pictures and stuff that the fancy editions have too.
Yeah, I bought a paperback at Comic Palooza, and it's got, just so that listeners know, it's got full color artwork, it's got maps, it's got other designs throughout the book to let you know, like I guess the chapters all start with a color image, which, when we're talking about paperback books, this is premium type stuff that you don't really get off the shelf at Barnes and Noble.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of when I and you could probably see it some with Breaker, but when I write these characters and get into their world, I really dig in and get to know them. So that's part of why I really like making their books beautiful too, because I just get so deep in that world and then the characters it's like, oh, I wanna do this and see this, and before I know it, I've got a whole special edition assembled.
Well, it shows in the book that I bought. Maybe it's something that, with going along with the small press that you mentioned earlier, this helps things stand out. But I think it I think it works, to the benefit of the reader and the book, because it also helps give the reader an idea, like this is what I'm talking about, with
Yeah, exactly. Well,
little
and what's
touchstones.
been what's really fun is when I do events like Comic Palooza, I'll have people, adults like us walk up and they're just, they're used to seeing kids' books with pictures because, kids got all the fun stuff right now. So when they open a book for adults with illustrations, they're like, oh, wow, because it's, kind of a rarity. And that still appeals to a lot of adults. Like, I know whenever I see a fun book, not like a textbook with pictures in it, I'm like, ooh, like this is immersive. I get to see things. So I
Mm.
think a lot of people appreciate that.
Do you carry that through your other book series?
Yes, pretty much. I've become obsessed with really digging into the characters and the world. So, my second series that I began, which is my Airship Dragons, that actually takes place in the same world as the Outlaw Mages. And so, pretty much my publishing pipeline now, before a book goes to retailers or even to my website, they now have a Kickstarter first in general. So, the
Hmm.
Kickstarter gets the fancy special edition and all of the effort, which it's kind of funny because a lot of authors they focus on their retail launch on Amazon and really push those. But for me, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, they're okay, but they don't get my pretty editions. So all of my marketing effort goes into the special editions, and push those and try to show how special they are because they go on Kickstarter, they go on my store, and they go to the special events like Comic Palooza.
Yeah, so you're kind of rewarding for the people that intentionally support you.
Right, exactly.
I mean, obviously, people that buy your stuff at Barnes and Noble intentionally support, but I mean, like, come find you, want to know more, you know.
Right, exactly.
So yeah,
There's a lot of readers who, we see it with some of the bigger, authors like I can't remember her name now, but the Fourth Wing author, whenever that book had like an edition come out with edges at Target, people were just ravenously going to go get that special edition book, even though they already had the regular print copy or they had the ebook or whatever version. So people who really identify with the series love when they could kind of delve into it more too.
so you mentioned the Airship Dragons, and that you said is in the same world, which I'm finding pretty interesting because isn't that more of like a steampunk type vibe with that world or that part of the world?
Yes, yes. So once you get further in Breaker, you'll kind of see there is a little bit of steampunk in it too, but not as much as in Airship Dragons. So Airship Dragons, well, Breaker and the Outlaw Mages takes place in like a Old West style, so kind of, think Texas area. So Airship Dragons takes place closer to the equator, so think more tropical islands, that type of vibe.
Hmm.
So they're still same world, but different latitudes.
What is the premise with the Airship Dragons? And whenever you mention fantasy and dragons, I mean, they just go together hand in hand. Fantasy without dragons is sort of like, huh? Well, I guess. But
Well, so it's really funny the way I first came up with the idea for book one, which is Dragon Latitudes, because a lot of times my books are like, okay, but what if this? And then I go down the rabbit hole and it becomes totally different than the original idea. So my original idea was, what if Moby Dick, but instead of whales, dragons? So I was like,
Mm.
okay, that's interesting. So they have to have airships to hunt them, and they have to have harpoons, and this is how it goes. But then as I start writing, I'm what's called a discovery writer. So I don't know what's going to happen next a lot of the time. So I discover things as my characters do. So I knew for Dragon Latitudes that the main character, Elazar, he thinks he's human, but he's actually a dragon who doesn't know he's human because of circumstances that I won't give away because they're spoilers. But so he actually grew up on a dragon hunting airship, which I thought that's going to give him a lot of, well, he probably needs to see a therapist because he was hunting dragons for all of his life until he later, as a young adult, learns he's a dragon. But I just thought that would give us, lots of conflict and make it really interesting. So in Dragon Latitudes, what kind of happens to get things kicked off is he's on this airship, they're hunting dragons. He's actually not very good at it. He'd rather not be doing it because he'd rather just be doing his work. And he has magic too, kind of like the mages. His magic is very steampunky. He can manipulate technology with his magic.
Hmm.
And he actually has a little, and I'm using air quotes you can't see, but animal companion who is a parrot named Sprocket. But Sprocket is actually a mechanical parrot that he brought to life accidentally through his magic. So they're hunting a dragon, and this dragon is kind of clawing the deck of the ship, and she sees Elazar and calls him a traitor, which he doesn't know that dragons can talk. So that's kind of a very big surprise to him. And then the dragon dies, so he can't find out more about this. And then eventually a new recruit comes on board who is a dragon in human form, but he doesn't know this. But the newcomer, Kalen, he knows what Elazar is. And so he keeps telling him, like, you're a dragon. And Elazar's like, no, you're crazy. I hunt dragons. I'm not one. And then to prove his point, Kalen throws Elazar off of the airship. And Elazar thought he was going to die, but when he hits the water, he becomes a dragon. So his new problem is trying to figure out how to become human again and not get killed by his former crew.
Since you were willing to spoil all that, I bet that happens right off the bat.
That's pretty early in the first book. So that's one of the hooks I give people because after that I don't tell them how it goes. But yeah, that's how he gets into that problem. It's kind of like in Thor Ragnarok when Thor's hanging at the beginning and he's like, you're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Like
Yeah.
to me, that's how this begins for that book.
That's really interesting stuff. So they hunt dragons, and are there any allied dragons or kingdoms that use dragons as mounts or anything like that?
Not at this point. So this series kind of what's really funny is as I write, I find out I bring a lot of different social issues into my writing without even meaning to. And then later I'm like, oh, I have a whole theme about this thing that's in the real world right now. So one of the things that comes out as the series progresses is the ethic behind dragon hunting, because dragons are actually intelligent, sentient creatures. And so they're pretty much effectively hunting and killing these sentient creatures. So they have a lot of ethics to unravel with that, but it's also a very capitalist society. What else does that sound like? So the people who have all the money don't really want to stop hunting dragons because this is how they make their money. So there's going to be a lot of that getting wrestled with in book 3 that I'm working on.
All right. So yeah, it sounds like it does lean on humans' relationship with whales
Yes.
as some inspiration there, except the stakes are a little different when the prey can light you up on fire, I'm sure.
Well, so what's funny is in this world, and I have to have like specific notes because I have another series with dragons in it. So in this world, dragons cannot breathe fire because I thought that would be a very unfair advantage against an airship with a balloon filled with some kind of gas. I was like, I can't have them just, making a fireworks display every time they come across a ship hunting them.
But they probably do have teeth and talons and all the other dangerous
Yes.
things. All right.
Yes, they're very fierce. Another kind of little bit of world building I did with the dragons is, they don't have the fire, but one of their defenses is their scales. And the dragons, they actually, so during the winter, they have these nesting islands on the equator that they live. And then when it becomes summer, they migrate north to the mainland where they actually go to the mountains and they eat ore and then ore and gemstones. And then the ore and gemstones helps make their scales tough.
I really like the idea that you had this fantasy world that you'd built around kind of the Western motif and thought, well, it is a big world. Why don't I just go kind of kitchen sink with this thing and fill out another part of the world?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it. Like for my newest series I worked on, I thought, as much fun as staying in that one world is, it also starts to limit you a little bit.
Hmm.
So when I had other ideas, I said, let me start fresh in another world where I can have a whole new set of rules because in my other world, I have a dragon that does breathe fire.
And that is the Gilded Prince.
Yes, that's the Gilded Prince. That world, it has a lot more of the traditional fantasy feel because one of the characters is a knight, and then the main character, Cedric, is a prince slash dragon. So that one has a lot more of the familiar fantasy motifs, but of course, I turn them on their head too.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've done that with your previous books. So I think your readers probably expect it that it's
Yes, yes,
not
they
straightforward.
do.
All right, so a theme in your books I have heard is the idea of a found family. Um,
Yes.
what about that dynamic do you find fun to write?
I think it's not so much fun, just as like the kind of warm, gooey feeling that I get inside whenever they're like, oh, this person who was broken and thought no one would like them or accept them, they found these people who will accept them for who they are. And I think that's just a very human thing. And I thought, a lot of people resonate with that. I know, like, I just think of that idea and it just makes me like give like the big eyes and think, oh, that's so sweet. And that's what we need more of in this world. So for me, it's more about like the vibes for a theme like that.
Yeah, that kind of sticks with your approach to setting and that kind of stuff. Does it feel right rather than getting the exact grain count right in a bullet or or
Yes,
something like that?
exactly.
Well, you mentioned that you're a discovery writer. They often call that a pantser, but it sounds to me like you do quite a bit of world building, at least mentally, so that you have some idea of your characters, your stuff, your what passes the sniff test in your world and what doesn't.
That's somewhat true. So some of it's going to be a little bit like the very common saying, building the airplane as you're flying it. So I've got part of the airplane, but I may be putting the roof on the airplane as we're flying it as I'm writing. So I'll have some of those basic ideas, but I'm terrible at like, doing world building as I'm writing and then like writing down things about that to document it because I get so busy writing. I'm like, oh, I'll remember this little fact. And, later I've got to go through all of my notes to figure out, okay, what chapter was this specific thing in that I need to refer to now because it's part of the world building.
Right.
Um, so I've tried to get better about that, but that's like one of my toxic traits is that I'll do all this world building as I'm writing and then not document it. And then future Amy has to go find the thing again. And at that point, then I'm like, okay, I'm adding this to my notes.
I mean, that makes sense. Authors do that. In the aforementioned Dark Tower series, the books were spread out over so long, and they were so long, that he actually hired someone to make a book about his books that stored all the facts and dates and times and character notes and all that for him. Because, like you, he'd sort of lost track
Yes.
of, he said that, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny because like I don't need that so much for the characters because I just know them so well in my head, but it's like, okay, what color did I say this,
Hmm.
side character that we used one time? Like what color is their hair? Like what do they look like? Or what town are they from? I don't know anymore.
Because readers will catch it right away
Oh yes.
if there's any divergence there. They'll wonder, especially in the fantasy world, like, what is she trying to say?
Exactly. They're like, does this mean something now?
Right. And then all of a sudden it's canon. It's on your Wikipedia page. We mentioned that a little bit about your process, and that you have devoted portions of your time in a busy life
Mhm.
to writing. Do you have like a designated space? Like this is mom's space. When mom's sitting there, she's not dealing with that over there. She's dealing with that, or is
Yes.
it less formal?
Yeah, so in our house, we were lucky enough to have a room that was supposed to be like a theater room, but I was like, no, I'm claiming part of this room as mine. So it's got shelves of model horses and some books. And this is actually kind of the room my husband and I use whenever we do our gaming as well with World of Warcraft. So we
Hmm.
have our personal computers in here, but my personal computer has now become my gaming computer slash my author place of business. So, but yeah, I do get to have my own space, which is good because that's kind of what I need to mentally be able to do the work. I can't, do it on the kitchen table with somebody playing Minecraft 3 feet away from me.
Yeah, the stories of those authors that are able to write anywhere, or I wrote this book in my car on my lunch breaks, or whatever the stories are. I'm like, that is something, man. I I really
Yes,
really
yes.
respect that ability. Because in the few times when I've decided to try to write something down, I have needed, I'm like the princess and the pea. I need to have everything exactly so, or it's just not going to work.
Yes, and I've gotten to the point where, I'm a woman of a certain age and task switching mentally has gotten harder. I still do a lot of multitasking, which I probably shouldn't do, but one of the things I'm finding is that I have a hard time. So being an indie author, I have to do a lot of administration on my own because I don't have anybody handling my social media or my email or this or that. So I have to do all of that. So I found that my creative brain and my administrative brain, they're like the two wolves inside of me, but they don't work together.
Hmm.
So if I'm doing administrative tasks, I'm pretty much all in for that. The creative wolf has to stay away and come out to play later.
That's always been sort of like a daunting aspect of the indie author life, is that with no one there to promote you, but you still, want people to be able to read your work, the indie author has to take all that on themselves.
Hmm.
Have you adapted to that with any ease, or has it been like, another thing, TikTok, jeez,
Yeah, I kind of feel that way about TikTok, even though I do have a channel there that I'm posting slideshows to. One of the things I've kind of had to learn to do, and it's really hard for me because I'll see a shiny new thing and I'm like, I want to go try the shiny new thing. So I've had to get to the point where it's like, okay, before we do the shiny new thing, let's assess it to see, like, will that move the needle in some way? If the answer is no, then let's hold off on the shiny new thing, because we only have so many hours in a day and we've got our kids, we still have to eat and sleep. So I have to see what I have to do and then prioritize. And sadly, a lot of the prioritizing has gone towards having to do those administrative tasks because if I don't have my Facebook ads running, well, right now I only have one Facebook ad running to my Kickstarter that's in late pledges. But, if I don't have my face or my books out there somewhere, people aren't going to buy them because there's just too much out there.
Yeah.
So I still have to have, some of that. I've got a web store that I have to upkeep, and I still have to write books and do all that stuff on top of it.
Are they print on demand, or do you actually have to keep stock?
So I do kind of a combination of both. Right now, most of my books I sell at my store come print on demand from Book Vault. But for my most recent Kickstarter for Talent and Treason, I'm actually doing a print run in China for Scales and Steel and Talent and Treason. So I have 300 copies of each of those books coming, but they're going to go to a fulfillment warehouse, and I don't have to find a place for them at my house
Oh, okay.
immediately. So that's a nice thing. But I like the print on demand a lot, but it is pricier than being able to get them much more cost effectively from China.
Then are you your own publisher then, or do you go through somebody else to help with anything?
I am my own publisher. I do all my covers, I do my formatting. I pretty much do everything. And I've kind of found out this appeals to me because the things I have had people do, I did have a cover designer when I first started, and she was very sweet, very nice, but I can start to micromanage where, maybe people don't want to be micromanaged. So I just thought, I don't want to pester these people, and I want to be able to do these beautiful special editions. So I'm also a learner, so I thought I'm going to sit down and figure out Affinity Photo and learn how to do all these things. So I've kind of self-taught myself how to do a lot of these publishing tasks.
Wow, that's very inspirational because it's a lot. It is a lot to
Yes, yes, it is.
just my for 1 year for my dad, he had written a book, and I formatted it and sent it into, I think it was BookBub, to
Hmm.
have a just one, printed for him for Christmas, and I didn't do anything special. I just put the page numbers on, made, made sure that all the front matter and all that was in the right spot and all that stuff. Made a very simple cover for him, and even that low level of production still was much more meticulous than I thought it was going to be. They kept sending it back, like, no, it doesn't work yet. No, it doesn't work yet. No, it doesn't work. So with the level that you're doing with the artwork and the color and the making sure that the colors are coming out the way that you expect, and the page, I'm sure like paper quality and cover quality is all like variables that you have to encounter and manage along the way. It's a lot.
Yes, well, it wasn't until I became an author that I was like, oh, now I have preferences about what cardboard books are or cardboard boxes are made out of and paper quality for different things. So I'm like, I did not see that part coming about having those opinions.
Right. It's not in the pamphlet of indie author.
Exactly. You never hear about authors caring about their paper or cardboard boxes for shipping things. Like you think they care about the books.
Yeah, right. All right. So you mentioned that you have the Gilded Prince. Is that going to be a series like your other books?
Yes, that one is going to be a trilogy. So, book one is already out. Book two just finished a Kickstarter in May, and that one's going to be out on retail in November. And then book three, I've written like two chapters of. So that's one of my other many projects I have to get back to.
And do you continue to write in the dragon and Western world?
Yes. So, for the Airship Dragon series, I have the first draft of book three for that series written, but I need to edit it because that's actually supposed to be in my fall Kickstarter. So that's next on my list to get to when I finish all of the stuff from my previous Kickstarter that I'm working on for Talons and Treason. So I kind of have a production flow, and I do need to get back to the Outlaw Mages because they're kind of overdue for another book. But with the Gilded Prince series, that one has kind of become my breakout, my one that actually helps pay the bills a bit more than the others. So
Hmm.
after Scales and Steel last year did really well on Kickstarter, I said, okay, as much as I need to write these other series, I need to get book two out because I've got a couple hundred people who really want this book. So I kind of had to pivot and move to the world right now that's helping pay the bills before I can kind of get back to the others.
Yeah, you hear about that with authors and publishers is like there may be a vocal group that likes something that you've made that is several sequels in, but every line of books, the sequels tend not to sell as well as the book before them. It's just
Mhm.
the way the math is. And so at a certain point, they have to decide, do I keep writing that series that this group loves, but not enough people are buying, or do I do what you
Right.
said, which focus where what's hot right now?
Yeah, well, and like, so my other series, so the Outlaw Mages, that was kind of my passion project. And when I wrote the first book, I didn't think that writing was going to become like a whole career thing for me. So that series just became kind of a passion project, and
Hmm.
it's very hard to market pretty much everywhere just because people hear Western and they're like, oh, I read fantasy, I don't read Western. So that one has always been a hard sell until people get into it and they read book one. And I have really good what's called read through, where people go from book one to book two and so on. So if I can get people in there, then they get hooked. But it's the getting them in there that's always the challenge. And then kind of the same with the Airship Dragons, because some people see steampunk and they're like, oh, that's kind of weird. I don't like that. So those two, they're both really fun and interesting series, but they're not as easy to sell as I tell people this one, for Scales and Steel, which is the first book in the Gilded Prince series, I say it's about a knight who's sent to kill a dragon, but the dragon ends up being the cursed prince that he falls in love with. And then they're like, oh, take my money. So I'm like, okay, that one's much easier to sell.
It just makes sense. Um,
Yes.
we met at Comic Palooza, which is a show. It's one of the only shows in Houston. Do you have any other shows coming up?
I do not currently. There's usually one I go to in November, NerdCon, but I don't know that if I'm going to be doing that one or not. That one's in Chambers County, I believe. So not sure about that one. So the next thing I know I'll do for sure will be Comic Palooza next year, but of course that's a whole, 11 months away at this point.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you have to weigh the cost of getting a booth and the time it takes to be there and take all your stuff there versus what you can expect to get out of it, especially if the con doesn't really support authors or kind of supports authors. This past year
Right.
with Matt Dinneman being there, I thought he was like the most attended celebrity there, which was interesting because he's the author, and they and
Yes, and he's the one that we saw all the t-shirts for, people walking through there with all of his characters and different things on there. So I was like, okay, that's good for authors right there.
yeah, cosplaying as book characters is a pretty deep cut, but you
Yes.
but you saw it.
That's the dream right there.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've been several years, and years ago they seemed to have more like home run type national authors in the same batch.
hmm
And I don't know why they got away from that, but they did. And it's been very hit or miss after that. But at least they have something, whereas a lot of cons, they just ignore the writing part altogether. And it's
Yeah, well,
just,
I think it's because a lot of people just have this thought now that people don't read anymore. But what's been interesting to me is that when I do something like Comic Palooza, of course, granted, I cheat and I get a corner booth and I have my dragons facing outward as catnip. Like, I've literally had people walk by and then they U-turn and come back to me because they see the books. And,
hmm.
they'll be with their friends and they're like, oh, I didn't know people still read print books. And then their friend looks at them with this very offended look and they're like, I love print books.
Yeah. If only I could read as fast as I can listen. I'm a slow reader, but I devour audiobooks. Um, it's a weakness. Maybe I need more practice with reading. What's your view on just a point of reference? What's your view on the people that say that audiobook listening doesn't quite count as reading the book?
Well, so as a former librarian, I have to say that audiobooks are definitely a form of reading, but not just as a librarian, but also as, librarians do lots of education. And as a mom with a special needs kid, a lot of times my son's teachers have used an audiobook in tandem with a print book to help him be able to, understand the story and be able to follow along. So I really feel that any way that you're getting that narrative into you is valid, even if it's a graphic novel form, which some people don't count as a book either.
Totally agree. As a parent of a individual with deaf blindness, my wife and I have kind of navigated the world of both the deaf and the blind a little bit to try to understand, different stuff going on with those disabilities, and to just simply posit that reading doesn't count unless it's with your eyes is offensive.
It really is. It really is. And it's interesting because I saw a study or something not long ago about like whenever I read or write, I kind of have like a movie in my head, and so I just assumed everyone is like that, but a lot of people don't apparently. So I think those different forms of reading, whether it's audio, print book, ebook, or graphic novel, it appeals to different brain types.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. And if you're a fast reader, then more power to you. Great for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've known people who could read 300 books a year, and I'm like, I cannot do that. So
Whoa.
thank you for doing that for all the authors out there.
Right. Are these like Ernest Hemingway books, or are these big monsters? Uh,
When I
any,
worked at the library, a lot of them were romance readers. So, they'd be
ah,
300 pages, 350 pages. So they could get through them pretty quickly.
yeah, yeah. My mother is a romance reader, and she goes through them about like that. Um, anyhow, all right. So you have your website, amycampbell.info and amycampbellbooks.com. You're
Mhm.
on Amazon, I assume?
Yes, people can buy my more boring versions of my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo. Pretty much, I try to be as wide as possible because being a former librarian, I don't think we should be beholden to one corporation. So my books can be pretty much purchased everywhere. But authors always prefer if people are able to buy it directly from us because we get more of the money that way. Otherwise, Amazon gets a much bigger share than they
Right.
deserve, really.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have like a Facebook group or anything that listeners would want to look up?
I do have a Facebook page, not really a Facebook group. I tried that, but kind of like we talked about with TikTok earlier being one of those things, I just could not devote more of the little time I had to that. So I have a Facebook page, I have an Instagram, and I have the TikTok, which I like looking at TikTok. I don't like making them as much, but I do have some up there. So when people comment, I'll chat back with them. But I do a lot of scrolling and commenting and liking of other people's TikToks.
I think that covers everything that I had today, Amy. Thanks so much for finding the time to chat with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, good. I'm glad. This was my first one of these, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go. So I'm glad that it was fun. If you liked this podcast, there will be more coming. So please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you found this podcast. If you look in the show notes, you'll find links to everything that Amy just mentioned in terms of ways to find her books. Otherwise, leave us a rating and a review, and that will help other people find not only this podcast, but other great authors as well. Thanks a lot.
On Clubhouse.